First of all, introducing our challenger.
Out of the blue corner.
He's going to step in and he does. It's all over.
Let's bring on the boom.
This is Eternal MMA.
All right, everybody, welcome back and thank you for joining us here once again on another edition of the Eternal Insiders Podcast, powered by Fight HQ. Fight HQ, the official uniform partner for Eternal MMA. You can visit fighthq.com.au or scan the QR code that you can see on your screen below for all of your combat sports, training and apparel needs. That's fighthq.com.au. Support the team that supports the fighters for Australia's leading MMA promotion. Grab yourself some quality gear while you are at it. And with that, let us welcome in today's guest, Mr. Ben Vickers, co-promoter for Eternal MMA, kind enough to share some of his meager time that he has with us today to talk about the year that has been, some of the really cool things that we've got coming up and everything in between. Ben, thanks for joining me here today, man. How are things with you, mate? It's been a while since we've spoken, but it's good to talk to you again here.
Yeah, things are really good, mate. Firstly, I want to apologise for being late. I hate being late.
We could have kept that to ourselves. No one knows.
No, I don't. I like to own these things. So, firstly, apologies for being late. I am just crazy busy at the moment, which is cool. Like, Eternal's doing big things and Scrappy's doing big things. And I've just brought a new coach over from England, an old coach of mine. So, yeah, there's a lot going on, a lot of opportunity, a lot of exciting things happening. I'm super happy with where everything's at right now.
I don't doubt that, man. And look, just in terms of that, for anyone who's familiar with Eternal MMA whatsoever, knows that you certainly wear two hats in terms of what you do on a day-to-day basis. So you can be forgiven, first and foremost, ahead of everyone, for being late to any kind of appointments that we might tee up. But with that, I mean, let's jump straight into it because, I mean, what a year that it's been for Eternal MMA across the first 6 months that we've had. I think something like 5 cards we've had since February. And not to mention 3 of those cards kind of back-to-back in the span of 4 weeks across 3 states. Like, what an incredible achievement that was. Some 4,500 plus fans that turned out to that. A lot of incredible cards, a lot of incredible fights. 3 new Eternal MMA champions. I mean, you know, I guess you probably don't get to stop and smell the rose a bit, but when you sort of think back to that, you know, first 6 months that we've had for 2024, how impressed are you? How happy are you? How satisfied are you, you know, as a promoter for the promotion? You know, just sort of compared to what we've kind of had in the years gone past, because this has been a cracking start to the year.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, we just had that epic run of like 3 shows in 4 weeks. And I think Cam and I both died after that show. Like, I think you run on adrenaline for so much of it. And then the sort of week and a half afterwards, I couldn't do anything. Like, my brain fell apart, my head fell off. I got sick, which I never normally do, to be fair. And yeah, it's hard. I don't think people appreciate the logistics and the, you know, we're rematching fights all the time. There's loads of stuff going on in the background. It's stressful. But what Eternal does best is overcome these problems and put together like awesome action, center cage. And 84, 85, 86, I think that's the run we just went on. Sydney, Perth, Gold Coast. Like, Sydney, I thought, oh, we've set the bar too high. You know, we're never going to be able to like replicate this. And then 2 weeks later in Perth, or a week later, we're in Perth, blew the roof off the place, like thousands of people in the venue, amazing fights. Like, we thought we're never going to have another fight card like this year. And then we roll into the Gold Coast, the spiritual home of Eternal MMA. And the MMA gods were smiling on us that night, but they had a few evil twists in their tails. One of them bit me. You know, I got stung a little bit that night as a scrappy guy. But what a phenomenal card. I mean, it's all, as always with Eternal, I find it's like the undercard starts and the fights are just building and building. You think, oh, it's never going to get any better than that, you know? And then it never fails to exceed itself. You know, it's quite phenomenal. And it's been brilliant. Like, and I hope the fans and those MMA aficionados in this country and even the casuals have enjoyed the last few weeks of entertainment that we've put forward.
No, I think that's an important point you made there to start with, and that not a lot of people see, and why would they, right? Like, see everything that kind of goes on behind the scenes in terms of the logistics and the challenges of matchmaking and, you know, moving sort of state to state. I can only imagine the challenges first and foremost of getting to 3 different states in a span of a month's time. But I mean, everything that sort of goes on behind the scenes, and for me, like, I'm kind of in a unique position where I'm obviously nowhere all the way in. I do this bit part, with the podcast and everything, but nor am I just a fan that sees it from the outside. So I can kind of see everything from the two sides that kind of make everything that goes into Eternal MMA for what it is. Everything from like you and Cam, matchmaking, the guys that are involved in production, guys that I'm sort of involved with, sort of the unsung guys like Win, who's helped me out tremendously with the podcast and everything. Like, seeing a little glimpse of that and everything that kind of goes into it has just been sort of incredible to see. And that sort of all culminated as well in that incredible 86 card that we just talked about. And look, we'd love to talk about every card that's gone on this year, but time allowing, not enough time for that. But I mean, what a card to talk about, because as you said, right from the first jump, I mean, I think it was 10 fights out of the 15 all finished in a finish. 5 of those inside the first round, starting off from the first prelim with just an incredible knockout to really set the tone, and then it just built from there. I mean, can you sort of appreciate, I know you sort of wear the two hats as a promoter and you're there as a coach and everything too, but I think for this card, top 3, I think on paper for me in terms of the strength of the card, but I mean, that's the greatest card for me of all time in terms of the way it played out. If you consider all the finishes, the performances and everything top to bottom, it was special. It really was.
Yeah, I don't think I could argue with you there, and it's like I say, it seems every Eternal we say that one was the best. Yeah, and then we do another one and we just exceed ourselves. And the fighters need to take a lot of credit for that. They always step up. They always put their bodies on the line, and they know they're on a big platform and they know they need to impress. Like nowadays, other than the odd anomaly who seems to squeak into the UFC, and we won't go into that too much, you have to impress the UFC. Like if you're most people, you have to like put an impressive performance on, and you have to show them that you're not just a good fighter who can win fights, but you're a finisher, you're exciting, you're a fan favorite. That's what the UFC matchmakers want to see, I thought. Sometimes, that gets disproved, that formula, and someone does slip through the net. But for me, like, the fighters have bought into that, what they need to do, especially on Eternal. Maybe not everywhere, but on Eternal, fighters know we need to not just turn up and win. We need to turn up, win, and win in impressive fashion, to move to the next level. And I think that, that message is really strongly resounding with the fighters, and we get the shows that we get, so a lot of credit must go to those guys.
No, of course. And there's a couple of things I do want to talk about before we do see you off in about 35 minutes time. Of course, all the credit goes to the fighters. And I mean, Eternal MMA, especially over the last couple of years, has just sort of turned into kind of the proverbial conveyor belt for fighters kind of going into the UFC. We've seen guys like Quill and Soulkilled, of course, get announced for Dana White's Contender Series. Your boy, Anthony Drillich, of course, at Scrappy MMA, that just got announced this week. What's just been an incredible first half of the year for Eternal MMA fighters going over there and trying their hand, in that big promotion. We've seen guys like Steven Erceg, of course, jump from Eternal MMA and do such big things in such a small amount of time. And there's so many more guys to follow. Australian MMA, just as a whole, is just absolutely on fire right now. I did want to ask as well, this is sort of something I've thought about recently. In terms of Australian mixed martial arts and the fighters we're kind of producing here, if you look at the population we have, I guess, compared to a lot of the rest of the world and the guys that we've got coming out of this country, I don't think it's going to be too long before, pound for pound in terms of the fighters we're pumping out, when you compare to a lot of the other countries that are fighting in the UFC, like, we're going to be right up there sooner rather than later for the amount of fighters we've got coming and going overseas with the guys that are sort of joining there at the moment. Like, this is sort of the golden age continued for Australian MMA, and Eternal MMA is sort of the forefront of that. You see this stuff firsthand.
Yeah, and pound for pound, I think we're already there. If you look at the quality of fighter per capita, per head, with this tiny population we have here in Australia, and then you sort of reverse engineer that population down to those that actually do MMA. Like, there's not a great deal of people doing this sport in the grander scheme of things, and the numbers that we've got into the UFC, and we've had 2 guys, Izzy and Volk, top of the pound for pound rankings from the region at times. And you just look at the standard of the Aussie fighters that go, for the most part, right, there are exceptions, and I know I keep alluding to these things, but I'm just going to allude today. I'm not going to actually say. I'm going to let people dot their own I's and cross their own T's. But, for the most part, the standard of Australian fight, they don't just go in there and lose fights and get kicked out. They're having long careers and they're winning fights and they're putting runs together and they're showing the standard. And it's a credit to the coaches and the consistency and the fact that people have stuck to the sport for so long. And we're seeing all those guys that committed a decade ago now getting the fruits of their labor recognized. And it's really cool to see. And I think we're only going to go from strength to strength.
There's a couple of things that I want to talk about there, and I do want to come back to Eternal 86, because the Eternal MMA show, and I definitely want to shine the light on the guys that are still here. But in terms of the guys that have gone across, for UFC 305 coming out, I think at least so far we got 4 former fighters and champions, from Eternal MMA that competed on that card. Stephen Erceg, Tom Nolan, we got Jack Jenkins. There was someone else that I might have been forgetting in terms of the other names on there, but just an incredible Casey O'Neill, look at that. Cam will never forgive me for that little gaff there. I'm sitting there pretending like I'm trying to remember.
Punch it sometimes she sees you.
Yeah, she'll never see me too far away.
Mate. Don't worry about that.
I'm hiding here down in Victoria. No one ever comes down here, so I'm well and truly out of the way of that. So, forgive me for that one. Of course, Casey O'Neill is coming over to compete in the UFC in Australia for the very first time. Cannot wait for that one there. But just on Stephen Erceg, already had a title fight in UFC. He's a Perth boy, someone that you have seen obviously come through the promotion. You're in such close proximity to him. Just a great example of someone who's done so much in the sport in such a short amount of time. Also not least Jack Della Maddalena out of Scrappy MMA. I'd love to talk about him too. But Stephen's rise in the sport in such a short period of time, does that surprise you in terms of how quick he has sort of ascended to that position based on sort of where he was 12 to 18 months ago?
It doesn't surprise me. But I've been on another podcast saying that before he got into the UFC, that I thought he'd be the flyweight champion of the world. So, and I see him like once or twice a week, sometimes he's not been as consistent as he was when but we do train together sometimes. He's definitely not a student of mine. He's there, but he does come in the gym and, Dave's his coach and his dad's his coach and Wilkes is his gym. But every now and again, we're up the road from one another. So Steve comes in and gets working with the boys. And I see him on a weekly basis pretty much. And I know how good he is. So I'm not surprised at all. And then the speed of the rise, he got that short notice opportunity, which for me is where fighters go wrong. You should be ready to take these opportunities, especially if you're at the pinnacle of your career. And Steve sort of flew to Canada on 10 days notice or whatever it was and big ranked opponent and put himself straight in the mix immediately. And for me, that's what everyone who's got UFC and world ambition you got to be in the gym full time so you can take these opportunities when they come and maximize them. It would have been great for him to go there and, and even on short notice, if he lost to a ranked opponent, his stock wouldn't have dropped if he put on a good performance, but it's not what he wants. He wants to go in there and win, even though it's short notice and all the cards are stacked against you and all that kind of stuff. If you're diligent in your career and you're a professional like Steve is, then he was ready to put out a good performance, not just ready to make weight and fight. He was ready to make weight and fight and show how good he was. So I think Steve's put himself in those positions by his preparedness and his professionalism. And I am not surprised in the slightest that he is where I'm just surprised he didn't win.
Yeah, I mean, it was certainly a close fight, and it was an incredible fight. I think, ironically, it's not that you would want Steve to not win. Of course, if we could take it back and if we could change a few things for Steve, and I'm sure he'd want to change a couple of things and get himself the win. But I think, ironically, it sort of put him over a little bit more in the fans' eyes because there's one thing that fans hate to see. It's someone winning by the scrape of their teeth that they don't think deserves to win, whether they like them or not. So I think, ironically, it's just blown him up sort of bigger than ever. So it's really cool to see someone like Steve, who didn't really have kind of the highest, I guess, promotional value in terms of promoting himself, just all of a sudden blow up with the fans, on Instagram, and just seeing his personality shine through as such a simple guy has been a really cool thing and a pleasure to kind of watch. Other guys that we've obviously got coming through. Next guy I'd love to talk about, Quillan Soulkilled, of course, our lightweight champion, getting his shot on Dana White's Contender Series coming up soon. I think this has got to be something of a feeling of vindication for yourself and Cam, because I think when you look back to that fight that he had with Blake Donnelly when he first captured the title, there was, quite a few people that were wondering, is this too early? He was 3-0 at the time. This is a spot that he shouldn't sort of be in. That's not everybody, but there was certainly plenty of people sort of thinking it. And then he goes on this incredible run of wins, and now he's on Dana White's Contender Series. That's got to feel good that you put him in that position. And now look what he's doing, sort of showing the world this was the right call. And he's going on and doing big things overseas.
Yeah, and again, like you said, we put him in that position. I don't think we did. I think he puts himself in that position. Like, I don't like to take credit for that stuff. Yeah, we make the fights and all that kind of stuff, but Quill has to turn up. He has to win. He has to train. He has to have the right group behind him. He has to be talking to the right people. So, it's very easy to stand here. And like I say, he came through our promotion, but, the work was all done by Quill. And he's a guy that I knew early with him as well that he was going to be great. And he's the first person I ever signed exclusive for Eternal, believe it or not. He's always stuck out to me. And not only as a fighter, like, he's obviously clearly very talented. And I remember through his amateur career, he was like taking loads of Muay Thai fights. He was so active. He was just like fighting every weekend. And you can see it from like the maturity in his performances now. He's such a veteran. He's such a veteran of the sport for someone so young, and not even outside of the fighting, but just as a person and as someone that I've had to deal with for the last decade or however long he's been fighting for. I don't know exactly how long it is. He's just been a joy to deal with all the time. Just like, couldn't be politer, couldn't be nicer. He's got a nice personality. He's good to promote. He's exciting. He's fun, but he's a humble, hardworking young man, and he deserves everything he's going to get. And I have high hopes for him to also bring another belt back to W. I think we're going to have at least three, maybe four belts in WA, UFC belts in the next few years. So,
well, let's talk about that because, obviously you said right from the get-go, way back when Jack was 0-2 in his career, you always said that he was going to be a UFC champion. We know he's dealing with his injuries and that sort of thing as well, and we can't wait to see him back, but certainly well-positioned at the top of the welterweight pile in the UFC. So, someone we could definitely see bring a belt back to Perth, Western Australia. But, touching on the guys that have been with Eternal MMA recently, your man Anthony Drillich getting himself a shot with Dana White's Contender Series. As the hardest hitting pound for pound Australian fighter that we have in this country at the moment, all the way down to flyweight Anthony Drillich. Can you just talk about the rise that you've seen with Anthony coming down through sort of the weight classes and everything, becoming the eternal flyweight champion, and going on to be this next name in the incredible run of names that we've had come from Eternal MMA and going to the UFC via the route of the Contender Series?
Yeah, absolutely. But first, I'd like to just put a bit of shine on someone else because
Please.
I feel like there's a guy from Eternal who's a champ who's in the UFC that doesn't get the shine he should, and that's Jack Jenkins.
I was going to touch on Jack, but please do, of course, yes.
I don't think anyone talks about Jack enough. Jack was a guy that when he was operating outside of Eternal, I was very keen to get into Eternal because I just he knows the Della brothers from rugby and stuff from back in the day. So I had this little bit of insight into Jack, and then I watched him fight, and I really like the way he fights, and I really like the way he presents himself as an athlete, and I like his style. So it was great to get him across to Eternal, and then obviously he went on a tear, beat everybody, every challenge that came his way. He dealt with it, and then he got into the UFC. He was doing great, and then he had this really unfortunate injury that's sort of kind of sidelined him for a bit and brought him out of relevance a little bit. And I just want to make sure that people aren't sleeping on Jack Jenkins. Jack Jenkins, incredible fighter, incredible Eternal champion, and someone that I'm super proud of to have had a minor part in his journey. But I think sometimes because I have so many fighters in my brain, I even forget to mention him. And I've noticed consciously on a few interviews I've had where we've talked about Eternal talent and stuff, I sometimes leave Jack Jenkins out, and it's not because he doesn't deserve to be spoken about. It's just because sometimes it slips my mind. I'm not the best at remembering things anyway, but I wanted to talk about Jack Jenkins on this podcast in particular because I sometimes feel like he gets left out of the conversation a little bit because he gets overshadowed by Jack Della or someone like that. And Jack's obviously at the very infancy of his UFC career, and he's had a bit of a layoff. So I'm really excited to see him come back in Perth and see what he's been working on in the background. You know, he's going to have been beavering away with what he can and do with around his injury for what has it been? How long ago was that injury? Like a year or so?
At least.
Are we talking a year?
Yeah, more, I think.
So it's going to be so exciting. I'm really excited for the return of Jack Jenkins. It's one of my favorite things to be happening in the Perth UFC card. So I just wanted to put that in there before we talk about Ant, because no one likes hearing someone talk about themselves and their own shit. It's like, to me, it's egotistical and it's annoying. So I'd much rather talk about.
I'm glad you brought him up because, look, Jack, obviously a phenomenal champion for Eternal MMA, and, it's sort of a sweet thing for me to see too, because Jack's a country boy from Victoria, same as me. So, the couple of times that I had the pleasure of speaking to Jack while he was with the promotion, phenomenal champion, not just as a fighter, but as a human being too, just to sort of touch on your point there. Always at the time of day, has been on the podcast when he's been in the UFC, and just first and foremost, a phenomenal man before he is a fighter. So I did see him recently on a podcast touching on the fact that the break he's had recently was probably sort of a blessing in disguise for him, where he could just take some time with his family, sort of take stock of his life, kind of get a little bit of that stopgap in his career before he moves to the next phase. And he believes that's going to reap benefits for his fight coming up versus Gavin Tucker, which is going to be an absolute cracking fight. Hopefully, I mean, it's not a cracking fight. Hopefully he dusts him inside one. We'd love to see that, of course. But no, thank you for bringing that up. Hats off to Jack Jenkins. Certainly gone but not forgotten out of Eternal MMA. But look, it's easy to forget. We've got such a long line of guys that come out of this promotion and go across,
So, Ant, I mean, I've watched Ant develop obviously very closely over the last few years. I mean, he came from a phenomenal coach, Marcus McKeever, who a lot of people who know the game, especially in WA, will know how put together that guy is as a coach. He spent a lot of time in Liverpool with Next Gen, Paddy Pimblett's gym, and just a phenomenal grappler, a phenomenal martial artist. And he did a lot of work with Ant, but then Ant moved away from Mandurah to north of Perth, which is quite the opposite. So then it was hard for him to get down to Mandurah. So he joined, when we had the day classes, he came and joined our team. So a lot of credit needs to go to the work, the foundations that were applied by Marcus McKeever back in the day at Mandurah Combat Sports Academy. But then I get this guy who's got all these skills, and he just needs polishing a bit, and he just needs a bit of discipline and a bit of structure. And, he's got all these amazing tools. He's a black belt, a phenomenal black belt, like by Marcus, who's one of the best black belts in WA. And he doesn't get out there and compete as much as he used to, Marcus, but you roll with that guy. And, I'm a black belt myself, and I feel like I didn't even get my white belt yet. So Anthony has that style of jiu-jitsu as well that no one sees, because he just irons people out with that dynamite left hand. What I loved about his Max knockout was it was finished with the uppercut. So it proves he's not just a one-trick pony. He's a beautiful boxer. He's got knockouts at welterweight. So he's obviously got the strength and the his bones density and his ligaments are all strong enough to be 70, 80 kilos. And he's now operating at 56 kilos. So, he's durable. He's got the chin of a welterweight. He's got the power of a heavyweight, all operating in a lightweight frame. So, and he's got that thing that he can hit you once, which not many flyweights can, and put you out. And not many fighters have that equalizer. So he has all the skills the other ones have, and he has dynamite in his hands. So it's a very exciting time for Anthony. And he's pissed off, and he feels a little bit disrespected, and he feels a little bit passed over. He feels like he's done everything he needed to do and not got the shout for his hometown, whereas someone perhaps less deserving did. But good luck to that person. I'm not going to give him any shine, but I don't wish him badly. I want everybody in Australia to do well. Like, it's good for the sport and it's good for MMA. I'm a guy that really believes in meritocracies, and I know the world isn't fair, but it pisses me off. I know life isn't fair. I'm old enough and ugly enough, and I've had enough shit happen to me to know that life isn't fair. But my biggest values are fairness and equality, and it pisses me off beyond measure when I have lads that I see every day knocking their nuts out, doing all the right things, and I'm giving them hard fights. You know, I'm not giving them the soft fights and trying to nurse them into the next phase of their career. I want to know that they're good enough when they get there, so they're not going to embarrass themselves and me and everybody else and the promotion because they get one pair of UFC socks and then they're back in the gym again. You know, and so I try and do things where my guys, like Eternal in general, I say me, but Eternal in general, like we kill our own ticket sellers because we put them in the right fights at the right time to develop their career. And if they don't come through it, some of them never come back because it's that moment where, oh, maybe I'm not quite good enough to make it to the next level. And I don't really need this. I'm going to go and do something else. Whereas it'd be much easier to get someone who's perhaps not of the same caliber that we put these guys against. But I just feel when they get to the other end, they won't be ready. So as much as my method and Eternal's method is sometimes self-destructive, you know, sometimes we kill our prospects because someone else beats them in their banana skin fight, the one that might propel them to the next level. But when they get there, like Eternal champs are something like 19 or 20-4 in the UFC. So if you get to the belt, you've done the right pathway, you've been through the acid tests, and you're ready to go on the next level. And that is, for me, what Eternal does. We develop fighters to prepare them and put them in and give them the experience for the next level. And I think that's what we see when we see guys that have come through our pathway properly, they excel at the next level. And there are a couple of examples of people that get taken out early and maybe they haven't had quite the experience I'd have liked to have given before they get to the next stage, you know. But we can only do so much and we only have so much say as to what goes on, but we have complete 100% say of what happens at Eternal. And I've had a lot of soul searching to do of late because I feel like the way that I match my own fighters is sometimes detrimental to their future, only in that when I put the banana skin fight there, it's a genuine banana skin. You know what I mean? They could slip up here and they've worked 9-10 years to get this run and get this record. I feel like you need that last acid test before you move to the next level. But a lot of people go, ooh, I don't want to test him here because what if he loses? I'm going to, you know, I'll find someone that fits the mold that's going to be a little bit easier. And it's not a guarantee. I'm not saying people are putting people that are guaranteed to beat in there, but sometimes I feel like, do I do my guys a disservice by always matching them so fucking hard? Do you know what I mean? Or should I take the, because for me, it's been proven recently that you don't need to have the strength of schedule because you can just slot in, like no matter who you fought. So it makes, but I'm not going to change who I am. And I'm not going to change the way I think it should be done because look at Jack Della, look at Casey, look at Jack Jenkins, look at Stephen Ursig. You know, all these dudes have, and dudettes, sorry, Casey, have the potential to be UFC world champions. So does Ant, you know. He's been putting hard fights. I was talking to a matchmaker in the Middle East the other day, and he said, oh, your flyweight guy must be world class because that Max Hunter is really, really good. I've seen him operate a lot. So, you know, that's the kind of fights we're putting our champions in. And for me, selfishly, I could have gone, oh, let's find Ant a can. You know, someone who looks good on paper that he can just iron out and we'll just move on to the big show, you know. But that's not, for me, that's a waste of a training camp. It's a waste of talent. It's a waste of effort. It's a waste of fucking time. And yeah, sometimes we're not always going to get the results we want. Like Wes, I put him against Dave Martinez, you know. Wes sells hundreds of tickets. I could have kept him winning in Perth, but he wanted to be in the right, credit to him, he wants to be in the right fight. He's a lifelong combat sports guy. He wants to be in the right fights. And, you know, Dave is a massive, like, he's on his way to being a 3-time Eternal champion. Like, that is a tough fight for someone who's a striker, you know. You know, at least find Wes a striker. People must be looking at me going, Ben, at least find Wes a fucking striker. Why give him Dave Martinez? But if you can't deal with Dave Martinez's grappling, you're going to really struggle in the UFC, you know, and I don't want to see that. And I don't want to be standing cage side in the UFC going, I can't coach this guy to win this fight because he's not good enough. Like, I never want to be there. So I'm in this real conundrum point of my life where I think I'm just going to have to stick to my guns, and like the ones that are good enough are going to make it, and I have to apologize to everybody else.
Can I just extend off that point too? And I think this is important. And I know we're cognizant of time because you've got other things that you need to get to. And I think I'm going to get you back on because I want to talk about, sort of the cards we got coming up. Eternal 87, obviously first and foremost with that, because what a cracking card that is. But just with what you mentioned there in terms of the guys that are taking these so-called banana skin fights and that sort of thing, hats off to the guys that are willing to find out early in their career, just sort of how good they are, because I don't think enough fans sort of know this, but not every fighter is willing to just go in there against absolutely anybody and test a medal early in their career, which was the point you sort of alluded to.
Let me just make a big point in there. That is a big point in this country at the moment. Yeah. I call them snakes, and not because of their character. That is not, but imagine there's like this guy, and this guy that you don't want to fight. So that I just put 3 dots, boom, 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 in a line. And there's someone who goes, well, what if I fight this guy, and this guy, and I can like go in between all the, and I can still get to the end point, And I think there's a lot of guys in Australia that are like that, and I think there's a lot of guys in Australia that will only take fights that are skewed in their favor, and I think most of that is down to their coaching. I think most fighters would fight anyone.
I just want to use a recent example of that we had the recent featherweight Grand Prix for the last card. Oliver Schmid, a guy that I had on the podcast, such a young kid, and I mean, what a gamer. And one of the things that impressed me about him the most when he came on the podcast is he said, look, this is a tough fight. It's short notice. I'm early in my career. Going up against a fucking monster like Dim Skillies. But he said, point blank, and look, he's got such a quiet, nice, unassuming demeanor. But when it comes to talking about, testing himself, and he said just dead that, like, if I want to be in the UFC, these are the fights that I have to take to see, if I'm ready to be there. Like, he's someone that's willing to find this stuff out early. And what a trial by fire, because he fought Harry Webb in his pro debut up in a weight class. Yeah. And we know what Harry Webb's about. And I'm going to talk to you about Harry Webb on another show when we talk about the future cards, speaking of David Martinez and how that ties together for the lightweight belt coming up. But
what
goes
time
out.
Is it now, Luke? We can carry on for a bit. Let's just keep going.
Well, what time have you got to go? Because we're just about 20 past 3. So
I've still got 15 minutes.
Okay. So well, I mean, look, I just wanted to. I didn't want to labour on that point too much, but
let me hit the point about. I want to talk about Ollie Schmidt though, because
please,
Dim's one of my favorite human beings in the whole world, and if you like fighters, if like you're into fighting, for me, I have this thing like beautiful violence is my thing, like. I don't know if you ever heard me mention it before, but I like technique, but with devastating intention. Like for me, and I say this to my boys, like when we win by decision, yes, it's a win, it's a green tick in the box and that, but it doesn't float my boat to win by decision. Unless it's like a 30-27 or 30-20 and you've battered someone. We want to stop people. We want to put a stamp on things. We want people to leave the cage like knowing that we won. Not like the Rod Costa fight, so ambiguous, right? Like, did he win? Didn't he? I thought he did enough to win, but I've told him myself I didn't like the fight. Like, I didn't like the way the fight played out, and I think that's what cost him. Like the eye-catching work was done by the other fella. And Rod's disappointed in that, and I think you're going to see a completely different Rod Costa when he fights JVH for the 3rd time, because that stuck a rocket in his ass because he doesn't want to put a performance out like that again. He's very honest with himself, Rod. He's not going to blow smoke up his own ass. Oh, yeah, I thought I won and cry about it. He's going to look at the fight and go, I made a lot of mistakes. Like, I had 12 and a half minutes on the ground with someone. I should be finishing it.
By the way, I just want to jump in very quickly. And just on that point, what has actually been very cool to come out of that, Kuya Ito, who took the belt from Rod over in Japan, it's very cool to see him kind of going on a bit of a victory lap tour with the Eternal MMA belt with his family and some I don't even know who they are, some like political officials, the mayor. And things like that, like that's cool. I don't know what, and look, we could get into this. I don't know what sort of the implications and the challenges are.
Let me go back a little bit. Let me stay on Ollie for a minute.
Please,
I off Ollie, but I had a good chat with Ollie after that fight. Like you said, he's had 3 fights. I think he's 2-1.
1 and 2.
1 and 2. Sorry, 1 and 2. The 2 losses are Harry Webb, Dimsky. I mean, for a dude that is like in the infancy of his career,
he's a kid.
Like he now knows what the level is, like the top level in the country is, and he is on that level and
he was competitive.
These boys, like, are not having an easy time with Ollie. And
no,
I had a long conversation with Ollie in the back after that fight, And I firmly believe he'll be the featherweight champion one day, like, because he's done this. Like, he's had the acid tests and the hard tests early. And yeah, he didn't come through them unscathed, but he showed that he could have won, well, definitely the Dimps fight. I can't remember the Harry fight, if I'm honest. But
the Harry fight, he was very competitive early, and then Harry just sort of, wilted him down sort of over time. But I mean, again, that was up at lightweight. That was up at lightweight, yeah. Yep.
But, he's been in with these guys. He knows those guys are both capable of fighting in the UFC and having good careers, Dimps and Harry. So Ollie knows he's also not far away from that level. And he now needs a fight on his level, like, so we can really see who Ollie is and what he is. But he's a guy that I'm super excited about. And talk about, like, your stock going up in a loss.
Yes.
Fight of the year candidate. He could have won that fight in the first round, even though I'm not going to go into the conversation we had in the back, but he did a lot of that fight subconsciously, which means his skills are freaking phenomenal because he doesn't have a lot of memory of the fight. So he's operating.
He's unconsciously skilled, as they say. Yeah.
And that is the goal. That's what we're all striving towards, is to not have to think about things. And that's clearly where he's at. So he's a very dangerous prospect for the future.
No, I'm very much looking forward to seeing whatever comes for Ollie. And look, there was so much we could sort of talk about in terms of the fights and the different title fights and everything that we've had in recent memory. But for the guys like that, to your point, I can't wait to see him matched up on someone with a sort of a similar record to what he's had. Because if we look at, not to talk about the win that he's had outside of Eternal, but I mean that lasted all of like 60 seconds with an incredible knockout. So. We definitely know what Ollie is certainly capable of. Just a couple of things before we go in terms of shouting out some of the things that we've had this year, even outside of Eternal 86. I mean, we crowned for the first time an Eternal MMA women's flyweight champion with Jacinta Austin in Sydney, which was a cool thing to see. As we said, we've had 3 new champions this year. We had Lachlan Stitt, which is another one that I wanted to touch on before you go too, because Lachlan was sort of an interesting prospect for me in that I had Lachlan on the show both before his title fight at Eternal 86 and after that, but it also made me cast back to when I had him on the podcast before the Peter Templar fight. Now, you've seen him up close, both fighting and personally, and I noticed such a big difference in terms of the demeanor of when he was first on the podcast before his fight with Peter Templar, and he's mentioned this as well, just the growth that he's had mentally, and as a fighter and everything as well. He's a different person entirely. And it was sort of a coming of age fight, this fight against John Varkey. Another similar example with, someone like Lachlan, who has such a small fight record against a guy that's got 20 more pro fights than him. Can you just talk about your sort of experience with Lockie Schmidt? Have you sort of seen that difference in terms of where he was compared to where he is now? Because that performance to win that vacant welterweight strap, that was incredible on top of what was the greatest card we've seen here.
Yeah, and he's so young. So obviously he's like maturing now into the sport, and he spent a bit of time in Thailand, which I always think gives you different looks and different partners. And I think Triple X is I love that gym and I love the way those guys fight, but I think there's only a couple of them in there. So for Lockie to be able to go out and expand his sparring partners and get different looks and stuff is really...
And you say that, and one of them's held the welterweight belt that he has now out of a gym, which is with a couple of guys. So incredible gym is Triple X Fighter.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And an amazing coach who his fighters, it's always very telling to me the way the fighters speak about the coach and the way they speak about him and how much he looks after them and how much of a mentor he is, and outside of just teaching them technique and stuff like that. So that stuff like means a lot to me too, because I know that role and I know people who do it badly and I know people who do it well. And he's obviously one of the guys that loves his students, loves the sport, and is really invested, and you see it. But yeah, Lockie's got a lot of potential. I'm so disappointed that he's not going to be in Perth fighting Olden. If you want to talk about an acid test, like I've said a lot today, that there's an acid test. That's a veteran, Olden Bates, a man with, ups and downs in the fight career. First man to beat Jack Della, but then last person to get beaten by Jack Della regionally. And then he stepped back into that cage where he had a terrible experience that time and just put all those demons to bed and took on John Varkey in his comeback fight. And Olden's mental strength and his actual add that to his physical strength. I mean, fuck me, what a specimen of a human being that guy is. So I'm just so sad that we didn't get to see that matchup yet. I was really looking forward to seeing Lockie, because it's been hard to match him. We have guaranteed matches and seeing his progress with rapid fire fights, and it's so much easier to develop when you're consistent fighting because you learn so much more fighting than you do in the gym because it's different. So translating all the skills that you have in the gym takes a bit of time, and fighting regularly is what helps you get to that quickly. I don't know why my hands are moving so much today, but
I'm playing with the cord to stop me from doing that, mate. So don't worry about it. You got to learn these techniques.
I think if you tied them together, I wouldn't be able to speak. So yeah, Lockie's super exciting. I hope his little niggles and all that heal up quick, and we can get him back out and get him fighting regularly. You know, he's got a tough challenge ahead of him against Olden Bates. You know, that's no one's walkover. So you got to kill that man to put him out of there. Otherwise, he's just going to keep coming. So I look forward to that fight down the track, and I'm really excited for regular Lockie fights. That's what I look forward to.
No, we definitely want to see that. And I mean, yeah, what an absolutely cracking fight that is on paper. Hopefully we do get to see that. I think Lockie might have alluded to the fact that, you know, he will be back sort of sooner rather than later. So heal up, Lockie. Can't wait to see you back in there with 100%. An incredible fight against Olden Bates. I mean, yeah, what a monster that guy is. But I mean, we look at that card, and I know we don't have sort of too much longer, but I mean, that Eternal 87 card, even without that fight on it, I mean, already shaping up to be the biggest card we've ever seen. I mean, we talked about David Martinez and Harry Webb already. At the top of that billing now, Dim Skilly's going up against Sebastian Salai. That, for me, is just such a tantalizing fight. I cannot wait to see that. If you look at that list, and you can talk about this, I mean, any number of these fights that are already on this main card could be a headliner on any other potential Eternal MMA card, or they have been previous champions, or they are champions, or they could be a headliner themselves. Rod Costa versus Justin Van Heerden 3, Jack Becker, your man at a Scrappy MMA, continuing his comeback on there in a rematch against Aiden Aguilera.
And that's a very special fight because he broke the leg in that arena against that guy. Yeah. You know, so to have that fight is that trilogy is special because of that storyline and the way those guys, and it happened in that arena and blah, blah, blah. And then you've got JVH and Rod, Van Heerden and Costa. Third fight, both the other two fights in that arena, both ending in knockouts, one each. You know, both of them. You couldn't write these stories, but it's a testament to what we've done at Eternal is we haven't thought about individual matches. We've thought about divisions. And that's why we're so keen on this exclusive and having people that are loyal to the promotion so we can have divisions. Yep. We can stand there on broadcast and say, this is going to be the next fight. This is your next fight. You know, not a lot of promotions can like pre-sell fights, or can have a card and then have the next card like being talked about. That's the difference, you know, and this is how we get these great storylines.
I like that you mentioned that, you know, because I did see the podcast that you were on recently where you talked about exclusive contracts and everything there in terms of actually having actual divisions, because that is a really interesting point. Like, how can you really sort of say divisions when fighters can be sort of coming and going at sort of will? And you know, on that point, I mean, Harry Webb, you know, a guy that, you go back to his first fight for Eternal MMA at Eternal 75, I think you were in the commentary booth for that one. And I mean, what an ascendancy that Harry's had. Because I think back then, you, by your own admission, you didn't know who Harry was. And now everyone in Australia kind of knows who Harry is. You touched on in his last fight how much you love the guys at the Infinite MMA gym. Down sort of near me in Central Victoria, I'm very happy with those guys. You know, having, you know, Luke Daly there as well on the previous card and everything too. Harry Webb, can you talk about him before you go in terms of what you think of him in terms of being a special talent? And, you know, this title fight coming up against David Martinez, like, what a cracker that's going to be. Yeah,
like you've got the evolution of Martinez as well. I mean, look at his striking on the Ryan Doyle, like the intensity and the intent in his striking now as to what it used. He used to use striking as a way to get to grappling, whereas now he's trying to hurt. I mean, that last like minute against Wes Capper where he's landing those elbows in the cage and excuse me, the heavy ground and pound. Like, he had Dim Skillies on the ground for 15 minutes and didn't do that. So there you can see the evolution in, and you know, Wes and Dimps they're not grapplers, they're strikers. And, you know, Dave kind of had his way with Wes on the floor, whereas Dimps did better. And I think that's more on Dave's improvement in his ground game and landing the damage and making people fear his top pressure a bit more. And then he's got the intent on the feet now. So, like, he's got the confidence to stand and bang. Like, he's got that Thai style now, and Ryan Doyle's been working really hard with him. And yeah, Harry's like, is obviously the future. He's a guy that sort of, as far as I know, has come up training MMA, and he's good everywhere. Like, the Infinite MMA style is awesome. Like, Luke Daly shows that as well. Like they can stand and bang, they can crack you, but they can also, they've got their stuff sorted out on the ground as well. I mean, it's going to be no cakewalk for Dave if he does get the fight to the ground. So Harry's super exciting. What I like about Infinite, and again, I talk about coaches a lot as a coach. You can see their coach is invested in them. He's not just working on their skills, but their brain and how they are as young lads. You know,
shout out John Campbell.
Both great. They're gentlemen, right? So yeah, I'm so excited for what both of those lads are going to do. I mean, we probably haven't announced it yet. I don't know. I'm not on social media, but Luke Daly's got an amazing fight matched up to come. So I won't drop that one yet. I'll leave that to the machine.
That's right. I'm just glad to hear he's back, man, because I know he did say on social media that he has a fight coming up. And I mean, I'm just like, oh, look, please still be with Eternal MMA because, man, like,
we've got a really good fight coming up for
okay.
Luke.
Fantastic. Yeah, love it.
So so there's that fight. So the Perth card is freaking insane.
Yeah, man.
It's just top. You got Kev Cophamel. Again, he's another bright young talent from Perth. You know, who had that great win against Joe Davis last time. Sorry, I'm so bad with names. I have so many fighters' names.
So many to remember. You know.
I can't even remember whoever matched Kev with this time. I can't even remember off the top of my head. I should know. Luke, you can tell me. You got Kev on there.
We'll circle back to this. I'm going to promote it at some point. We do an actual sort of look ahead. So we'll come back to it. The card's not all together there in the public sphere yet. So
I apologize. I really should know. You got Khan, who will open the pro card, and like I said, until he's the main event, he'll open a pro card. Who else have we got on there? We got a new Connor Birch. I'm really excited to see the Connor Birch fighting one of my boys at bantamweight. I'm really excited to see he's had a great amateur career, someone I've been talking about and in the background and talking to his team and stuff and trying to get him over to Eternal. So it's going to be really great to see him make his debut on the promotion. Who else have we got? I think we've only got 3 AMI fights. We've got that many pro fights that I'm only putting there.
Oh, okay, so very similar to the Eternal 86 card because, I mean, that was only a small amount of amateur fights too.
I mean, there's about 1 million fights on that card. I don't think there's going to be quite as many in Perth. But, yeah, it's just, I mean, even off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you the card because I've forgotten it. But I'm just so excited about it. There's title fights. There's trilogies. There's new up-and-comers. There's the veterans, and then we'll have, like, the 3 amateur fights I'm going to make are going to be absolute bangers, too, to get the evening going. So faces that Perth fans will be very familiar with and Eternal fans will be very familiar with on the amateur undercard, too. So, yeah, I just can't wait, man. It can't come soon enough. There's a buzz in the gym. The boys are all training really hard. I've got a few on again. I like it when the teams, we're just about to crank it back up next week. We've been sort of plodding along because it's not a massive turnaround from the last card to this card. So, yeah, we're going to have a short, sort of sharp camp. And, yeah, I just can't wait to get it all that weekend and that week in Perth.
I was going to say, yeah, tied in with the UFC and everything. Like, what a crazy weekend that's going to be.
Yeah, and the last one was insane, like the February one, UFC 284. And obviously Jack Spark. Oh, he did where he choked, what's his face? Randy Brown out.
Yep.
In the RAC arena, which for me, I drive past it every day on my way to the gym. So that was a great moment for me. And I hope that, obviously I don't have anyone on the UFC this time around, but I'm hoping that I can get the same sort of level of excitement out of the other Eternal dudes that are competing on the card and the other Aussies, like Josh Kulabau's on the card.
Yep.
Who is a guy I've got a great deal of time for. So yeah, I can't wait to see all the Aussies out the next day, sort of representing too. So yeah, exciting times, man. It's really exciting times for Australian MMA at the moment, and with the UFC's commitment to coming to Australia a lot more, I think we're going to get a lot more fighters in the UFC. And I think we're just going to go from strength to strength to strength.
No, the growth has been incredible. And I mean, speaking of the UFC coming over more and more and more, selfishly, I want them to get back over to my side of the country, back down in Victoria, because, I can't afford to be flying to Perth at the time. But last time I was in Perth, that was incredible. On top of that show that we had with Steve Erceg at the top, the fight that ultimately got him to the UFC, and then we had the UFC the next day. If it's anything like that weekend we had last time, I mean, even if we can sort of match that level, I'm sure it's going to be even bigger and better again. And again, just to sort of reiterate the fact that I forgot Casey O'Neill at the start of the show, seeing Casey coming over and fighting for the first time in the UFC in Australia is going to be a very cool thing to see. So, so much to look forward to. Everyone needs to get on top of their tickets at eternalmma.com because those tickets are going to go fast. I think 3,500 plus.
Fast, mate. We're
going to break records again this time around because we had 3,500, one of the Perth cards, however long ago it was, but this one's shaping up like it could top that potentially.
We've already sold like a good percentage of all the allocated tickets now, as was general admission. So, and I'm not just saying this as a salesman, but if you want to come to that show, get your tickets soon because it's going to sell out.
It's going to sell out. Get on top of them. It's always an absolutely incredible time at the HBF Stadium in Perth, Western Australia. So hopefully we do break some records again. Thanks for joining the show, Ben. I know you've got a few other things you got to get to, so appreciate your time. Thank you for talking about everything we've had so far, everything we got coming up. Would love to get you back on at some point and talk a little bit more in depth about some of the things we got in the future for Eternal MMA because it's been an incredible start to the year and everything that's ahead. It's just showing that the business, the company, Australian MMA is just going from strength to strength to strength, and Eternal MMA is certainly the forefront of that. So thank you again for your time. All the best, and can't wait to talk to you soon, man.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. And yeah, look, I feel like you only use me when you ain't got any other guests, but we'll try and get back on.
Because I don't want to bother you. I know you got so much on your hands, mate. I don't want to, I was sending the message, I'm like, oh, Ben, would you come on the show? Like, you got any time? So,
let's do another one before Perth so we can sort of dig down into it a bit deeper.
I'd love to do that.
And get some more. Hopefully there's some more gossip we can talk about. I'd love to.
Too. Hey, so long as you're free, I will have you on the show every single week if I could, mate. So please don't read into that.
I'm no Daryl Martin, mate, but I'm doing my best,
No, shout out to Daryl, and I will have any of you guys on the show anytime. So you are more than welcome here to come at any time and talk about everything.
When's Cam coming on, mate? Or you just haven't got the subtitles sorted yet?
Yeah, I mean, like I'm working on that. I've learned how to do that through the reels, but I haven't managed to translate that to an actual full YouTube video yet. So, he might have to sort himself out in that regard. But we'll get Cam back on at one point. Certainly get him back on one point.
He gets away with like swerving a lot of media, that guy.
Well, he's got to do the parts at the start of the show, when the cameras are on him with Blake and everything. He's got to do the setup there. So, it's he's doing his parts. He's got to sit cage side too. He's on camera a lot, so we can forgive him. But no, we'll get him back on.
Good.
For sure. No.
All right. Thanks a lot, Luke.
Appreciate the time, Ben. Yeah, all the best. Talk soon.
See you, mate.